Prussia's centers of power fought against the progressive and liberal movements that the French Revolution catalyzed and that Napoleon Bonaparte disseminated during the Napoleonic Wars. Following Napoleon's defeat in 1815, the Prussian army reverted to a conservative stronghold, rolling back internal liberal reforms influenced by the French Revolution and Napoleon. 33 years later, the Prussian monarchy and aristocracy needed the army to crush the 1848 revolutions in Germany. After the German Wars of Unification, Chancellor Otto von Bismarck established a constitution that neglected fundamental human rights and civic freedoms and created a Reichstag with no substantive power. This configuration, the Reich Chancellor, the government, and the army were accountable solely to the Kaiser. As Marxism, communism, and socialism gained prominence in the latter half of the 1800s, conservative factions enacted laws to suppress the growing socialist movement. By the onset of World War I, the Social Democratic Party had emerged as the largest political organization in the world. The German monarchy, aristocracy, industrial leaders, and military perceived liberalism, socialism, and the left as significant threats. Consequently, these power groups risked a European war to address their internal tensions, a decision that historians call, quote, escaping forward, end quote, which contributed to the outbreak of World War I. Only the devastation of the First World War, Kaiser Wilhelm's II abdication, and the army's defeat and subsequent refusal to support a German civil war allowed centrist groups, including the Social Democrats, to establish the Weimar Republic in the ruins of Imperial Germany. Until this juncture, these conservative factions had kept Germany illiberal and anti-democratic. The Weimar Republic began as a fragile entity, encumbered by the polycracy of rival power established by Bismarck, and the stab-in-the-back myth propagated by the German army leadership, which blamed socialists and Jews for Germany's war defeat. The SDP coalition's failure to effectively address unemployment during the post-1929 global depression further undermined the Republic. Following March 1930, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed 3 successive conservative chancellors whose actions severely compromised the Republic's foundations. The second appointee, Franz von Papen, even dreamed of returning to a pre-French Revolution hierarchical structure to create a utopian conservative Germany. By mid-1932, Papen and the Minister of Defense, General Kurt von Schleicher, recognized the necessity of garnering Nazi support for their authoritarian plans. They persuaded Hindenburg in July 1932 to dissolve the Reichstag and call for new elections. However, they underestimated the violent clashes between Nazi stormtroopers and the Communist Red Front fighters that resulted in numerous fatalities. Papen capitalized on this violence to oust the Prussian state government, while the army showcased its strength in Berlin, driven by fears of a socialist uprising. The law-abiding SDP did not resist an action that amounted to a coup approved by the head of state, the cabinet, and supported by the army. Historian Richard Evans stated, quote, "After 20 July 1932, the only realistic alternatives were a Nazi dictatorship or a conservative, authoritarian regime backed by the army," end quote. Despite his coup, Papen's strategy backfired, as the Reichstag elections revealed no moderate center, with the Communists and SDP on the far left, and the Nazis and the Center Party on the far right. With the Nazis as the largest party, Hitler demanded to lead a coalition government. Negotiations between Hindenburg and Papen with Hitler went nowhere, and Papen losing a vote of confidence meant another Reichstag election in November 1932. Although the Nazis lost 3 million votes because the middle class perceived a leftward shift in the new election, many middle-class and affluent Germans still preferred the Nazis over the Communists. This was due to their belief that the Nazis stood for German interests and would not seize private property, whereas the Communists would impose a class dictatorship, adhere to Moscow's interests, and confiscate private property. The Nazis remained the largest party. Amid optimistic economic forecast, Hindenburg, his advisors, and Papen saw an opportunity to tame the Nazis by bringing them into the government. When the new Chancellor Schleicher began advocating economic policies that alarmed conservative and business leaders, a coalition of conservative forces rallied around Hindenburg to oust him. As the Reichstag had already reverted to the powerless role established by Bismarck in terms of government selection, Hindenburg and his conservative conspirators collaborated with the far-right paramilitary group Stahlhelm to remove Schleicher. Simultaneously, the conservative conspirators, with Papen heavily involved, acted swiftly and agreed to have Hitler become the next Reich Chancellor, with a cabinet mainly composed of conservatives to keep him in check, as they mistakenly feared that Schleicher and the army were plotting a counter-coup to establish a military dictatorship. Hindenburg rejected Schleicher's request for extra constitutional powers to overcome his lack of parliamentary support to address the crisis, viewing it as an opportunity to push Schleicher out. When Schleicher resigned, he endorsed Hitler as Chancellor to prevent Papen from regaining the position. Schleicher and the army feared the left would incite civil war if Papen returned to power. Schleicher remarked, quote, "If Hitler wants to establish a dictatorship in the Reich, then the army will be the dictatorship within the dictatorship," end quote. Papen convinced a reluctant Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as the next Chancellor. On 30 January 1933, Hindenburg swore Hitler in as the Reich Chancellor to head a government dominated by Vice Chancellor Papen and the conservatives. In what can only be regarded as infamous last words, when one of Papen's associates voiced doubts over the Vice Chancellor's confidence that the conservative cabinet could easily control Hitler and the Nazis, Papen stated, quote, "You are wrong. We've engaged him for ourselves. Within months, we will have pushed Hitler so far into a corner that he'll squeak."